The Brother John Backstory. Hi, I'm John McNeil, and this is the Invest Strong Network. Welcome. So, for about 2 years now, I have been doing YouTube vids using the moniker Invest Strong. In that time, I've dropped some hints to my background and origin story, as they say in the comic books, but I felt that I could use this video to give a more in-depth and concise backstory to Brother John and the Invest Strong Network. All right, so here goes. I was born in Houston, Texas, and raised in Houston, Texas. Spent basically my entire life here in Houston, save a brief sojourn in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And I come from a middle-class black family, right? Folks, my late parents, my pops is from New York by way of South Carolina. My mumsy was also from New York by way of New Orleans, Louisiana. All right. Now, went to MB Smiley High School here in Houston on the Northeast Side, and have a 2-year degree from the Houston Community College System, Hotel Restaurant Management. Now, speaking of which, I have spent pretty much all of my adult life in the hospitality industry, right? Restaurants and hotels. Now, not exactly a glamorous living, but it has paid the bills and has allowed Brother John to amass a decent fortune, right? Now, the Invest Strong Network was basically designed for me to, shall we say, share the knowledge, right? Things that I have gained and experienced over the last really 30 years or so. Now, my journey into investments and economics and money in general really began in the early 1990s. So I was a young guy, striking out on my own, not having a whole lot of success, right? Really struggling. And there was one night in particular, where it all kind of came to a head. So I'm very frustrated, and I go to one of these 24-hour diners that we have here in town. And I'm sitting at the counter, dining and brooding about how everything's just not working out the way I would hope that it would work out. Sitting next to me was a very nice lady, and she and I cranked up a conversation. And she had mentioned that if I really wanted to have success in life financially, I needed to get involved in stock investing. Now, I had heard that previously, but coming from someone that I would consider a peer on a peer level, I was kind of struck by how insistent she was. But she went further than that. She actually scribbled down on a napkin an 800 number and passed it on to me. So I went home, I called the 800 number the following Monday, and it was the number to 20th Century Investments, which today is known as American Century Mutual Funds. All right, so this is a mutual fund house. And spoke with them, told them that I was interested in investing a certain amount. They sent me a prospectus of their funds, and in fairly short order, I began investing in their mutual funds. The first being the Ultra Fund, which had performed very well in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And we're talking about the early 1990s period here. And also an International Growth Fund, right? So I split my funds about half in Ultra and half in the International Growth. Those were my very first baby steps into the world of investing. Now, as I began to receive quarterly statements, and things like that, I began to get real interested in how this whole thing would work, right? Because I was having so much success with these mutual funds. Lil Johnny Mac here in Houston was making money investing in mutual funds. So I was like, wow, this is really cool. I want to know more about this. So I started studying the mutual fund industry, and it was huge in the early and middle 1990s. In fact, one business magazine labeled it as the best way to invest your money. This is back in the middle 1990s. All right. So I then began to invest in other mutual funds from different houses. There was Invesco funds, which I invested in. Also, the Lou Holland Growth Fund, which was actually managed by this black guy who I mentioned in a previous video about investing in black companies, Lewis Holland. And also I opened up an IRA mutual fund with the Vanguard Group, right? Okay. So, and then of course there was also Strong Funds, which has gone through a number of different incarnations over the last couple of decades or so, and now is known as the Bridgeway Opportunity Fund. But anyway, so I invested in all these funds. Okay, as I began to do more study in finance and investing, I became much more interested in individual stock issues, right? And so in the late 1990s, I began to invest directly in individual stocks. Now, my first holdings were fairly well-known names back then and are still today. GE, which I no longer own, Disney, also some utilities and financial companies that I was not very familiar with, but I started buying their stocks just to see how it would all turn out, right? At the same time, I began to dabble in government issue bonds. So I would buy some government issue bonds, and in fact, still holding those, right? And so this is late 1990s, early 2000s, began to do that. All right. Everything was going great until there was a double whammy in the early 2000s, right? So we had the .com bust, which drove down the financial markets by about 40%. And of course, that was piled on to by the September 11th attacks, right? Which also really leveled the financial markets. No pun intended there, but I mean, seriously damaged the financial markets. All right. So held through all of that, and recovered, and things were going really great. And until another massive whammy in 2008 to 2010, a combination of the financial crisis and then the follow-on Great Recession, which obviously are connected. And that entire experience was, in my opinion, the absolute worst thing I have personally experienced in my investment life, right? I mean, not only did it wallop my overall portfolio by about 45%, which was gut-wrenching, obviously, but the incredible protracted nature of the thing was just horrible. So basically, the bear market really began in November of 2007 and really did not end until the spring of 2009. That's an extraordinarily long period of time. And there are a lot of ups and downs in the meantime. But the nadir, right as Barack Obama and Joseph Biden were walking through the door, the nadir in the spring of 2009 was absolutely the most horrendous period that I have ever personally experienced. All right. So I did not exactly hold through that whole period. Now, I held most of my investments and kept pretty firm to them, but some of the more speculative issues, and especially issues that were in the mortgage industry, which I had held several stocks in that industry, I just unloaded all of them. And also companies that had basically been laid bare by the Great Recession outside of the real estate and mortgage industry. And I just had a feeling they just were never going to come back. I unloaded those shares too. And actually it's pretty significant amount. Didn't touch the mutual funds, but the individual shares I really got rid of. Okay. So eventually the markets recover and they began to recover strongly. And so in the late 2000 teens, I wanted to expand my horizons and start dabbling in other things. So I opened a lending club account, peer-to-peer lending, and I've done many videos on that. And still, I have that account, and it's winding down, but it is still active. Also, ground floor crowdfunding for real estate, started giving that a whirl, right? And both of those have actually done pretty well for me. Now, I have not invested a huge amount in either one of them, but the investments I have made have done pretty well. All right. Now, just recently, I had expanded my holdings a little bit more and dabbled in cryptocurrencies through the Crypto Trash to Treasure challenge. This is where I would sell, collect and sell scrap metals, and any proceeds of which I would use to buy cryptocurrency coins. I've been doing that since December of 2021. So far, that has been an absolute catastrophe, right? I mean, there's just really no way to sugarcoat it. But the experience has been valuable, right? And so that has enabled me to kind of see how the cryptocurrency markets work from the interior. And that's been valuable. All right. Now, just very recently, I have kind of gone back a bit to my original origins, and I have purchased more government bonds, in this sense, the I bonds, the inflation protected bonds, and began doing that last year, or earlier this year, rather, 2022. And I'll be doing it again next year to the tune of about 10 grand a piece, because that's the maximum as individuals, you can buy at least online. Now, I think they'll allow up to 15,000 if you purchase the paper bonds, but if you buy them electronically, 10,000 is the limit. All right. So that's kind of my backstory. I find the financial markets and investing profoundly interesting. But one thing I really wanted to communicate to my viewers here, and this is what Brother John has noticed in the last 13 years or so. In this time, the financial markets, stocks, bonds, everything has been manipulated in some way, shape, or form by the government, right? So the government put out lifelines to keep the economy afloat during the great financial crisis. I get that. They pulled back on some of that support, but never really entirely disengaged from that feeding of the economy, right? And the artificially low interest rates that were brought about. Now, then you add on to that the CV-19 pandemic, where the government just kind of wholesale began supporting, the financial markets and the economy in just ways that I can't even count how many ways they began to manipulate things and to keep everything afloat during the CV-19 pandemic. Again, pared back on some of that, but again, not all of it. And it's still, some aspects of it is still very much going on. And now you add to that this war in Ukraine, where the governments plural, are doing all kinds of things that are, again, manipulating the financial markets, the commodity markets. Just everything is being manipulated in one way, shape, or form. And that is making the analysis of stocks and companies very difficult. But I'm trying, right? I'm trying to labor through it. We'll see how it goes. I'll keep you abreast. That's my job. Keep you abreast on what's going on. and how I see things. So I just wanted to give you some background into Brother John. Hope you found it very interesting and informative. If so, hit that thumbs up button. I would appreciate it. Also, please leave a comment. I'll respond to each one. I promise you that. And of course, subscribe to Invest Strong. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, friends, and good blessings.